In this video we are going to take a look at a wonderful Metroidvania for the Commodore 64, and that is Steel Ranger. So guys, you know I love Commodore 64 games a lot. And the reason I love them is because they're just so atmospheric. And Steel Ranger is one of the most atmospheric, most amazing games on the platform. Both its visuals and music are so perfect, just so they come together so incredibly well that I absolutely cannot get enough of how this game looks and sounds. It's just amazing, and Steel Ranger is the type of game that I love playing when the weather outside has this industrial special vibe to it, and it's just incredible. Well, I love playing Commodore 64 games in general when the weather is like that, but Steel Ranger is just incredible when the weather has that industrial atmosphere to it. Somewhere between 2016 and 2022 or 2023, the Commodore 64 had a full-on renaissance. The system had so many brand new and amazing games that it was, at least for me, on par with the currently active modern platforms at the time. We got a ton of digital and physical releases of all kinds of games from all types and genres. Unfortunately, Commodore 64 development has slowed down significantly since then. However, the games we got in that period are absolutely phenomenal, and one of those games is Steel Ranger. Steel Ranger would be very familiar to all Metroidvania fans, and it's an exceptionally accessible game to those new to the genre. In fact, Steel Ranger doesn't really invent anything, but what it does so well. It refines Metroidvanias on a limited system such as the Commodore 64 to a point where, despite it not being overly original, Steel Ranger is, and I'm gonna say it up front, one of my absolute favorite Metroidvanias of all time. The game is just so well put together, the world is so well connected, everything just comes together so perfectly, and the game's overall simplicity and accessibility make it a very replayable Metroidvania, for me at least. And it's not an overly long game either. It can clock about 3 or 4 hours in length, and that is more than enough for a normal playthrough of a game like this. When it comes to the story, it's a very simple sci-fi premise about man versus machine. There is not much to it, however, the game does what it does with the story very well, and it introduces a few crew members that fight alongside your main character, who grow on you throughout the story, and you actually start caring about them and about their fate. It's not a big deal, but again, it's all so well put together. It's such a wonderful bite-sized Metroidvania that, even though the story isn't anything spectacular, it works very well in this specific context. As you traverse the amazing 8-bit world of Steel Ranger, you'll come across all kinds of different environments and enemies, some organic, some mechanical. Enemies in this game, at least on easy and normal difficulty, aren't overly difficult. However, one thing to note about these enemies is that the player can't always avoid their attacks or shots. However, the game has a very nice health replenishing system, which mitigates this issue completely. So guys, in true Metroidvania fashion, Steel Ranger offers all kinds of upgrades to increase the player's capabilities and skills. The game features two types of upgrades. We have mandatory upgrades, which the player finds by exploring the world. These upgrades are required in order to progress through the game. And second, we have optional purchasable upgrades, which help make the ranger, the player character, more powerful and more capable. In order to obtain these optional upgrades, the player has to buy them from upgrade stations by spending the game's currency, which happens to be parts. Parts that you find scattered throughout the world or get by defeating mechanical enemies. Now guys, let's take a look at the mandatory upgrades first, which include Steel Rangers take on the Metroid Morph Ball, in this game simply known as the Wheel. This ability is very similar to the wheel in the Turrican games, meaning that you can only use it for a limited amount of time before your fuel runs out. It cannot be used indefinitely, and it can damage enemies it touches. It's also important to note that while the player can drop bombs with the wheel, the bombs do not bounce the player up in midair if they detonate while the player is near or over them. And it's also important to note that you cannot drop bombs in midair, meaning that you have to be on solid ground or on a platform of some kind before dropping a bomb. The second mandatory upgrade is the high jump ability. While it's not the same as a double jump, it instantly helps the player feel more agile. Your ranger immediately feels more agile, jumping starts to feel much more natural. Not that jumping is bad before you gain the high jump upgrade, but this really improves it. The third mandatory upgrade builds upon the high jump ability, and that is a full-on jetpack. Now, don't you go thinking that you can just cheat through the game now by flying over all obstacles and so on. That's not how this works, because the jetpack requires fuel much like the wheel ability before it. It's important to note that this fuel automatically regenerates. However, you still have a finite amount of fuel when using the jetpack or wheel before regeneration starts. Due to the way this fuel regeneration system works, you might find yourself having a bit of downtime every now and again and having to wait for your fuel to regenerate before you can resume your jetpack or wheel activities. Now, this isn't all that bad. It happens rarely in the game, but it does happen from time to time. The fuel aspect when using the jetpack or wheel does add some strategy to using these abilities in the game, especially on higher difficulty levels. The final mandatory upgrade has also been lifted straight out of Metroid. Well, not really. I mean, it's a common upgrade in games like this, and I think that's okay, even if it does copy Metroid. So what this is basically a heat-resistive coating for your suit. This is an important upgrade for ensuring that you can safely traverse through the, of course, lava portion of the game, where you have two very important side objectives to complete, which, if completed, will contribute to the game's ending. Now, as I said, the second set of upgrades are optional and purchasable from upgrade stations. These upgrades include upgrades to your armor, which reduce damage taken, upgrades to the player's weapon power, which of course increases damage dealt to enemies with all weapons, there are upgrades that reduce fuel consumption for both the wheel and jetpack, as well as upgrades that reduce usage of ammo. Upgrades which increase the touch damage the wheel deals to enemies, and an upgrade which increases the player's health regeneration ability, or as it's known in this game, power regeneration. And finally, you have to use parts to purchase an item called Tech Analyzer, which should be your very first purchase in the game, since it's of utmost importance for completing a side objective very early on in the game. And if you don't do this then, because each of these side objectives, while not timed, it does have time frames that you can complete them in. And if you don't complete this particular side objective early on, and if you don't bring the Tech Analyzer to the right character, you are not going to be able to save one of your crewmates, which is going to contribute to your ending. The game's currency, the parts, can also be used to purchase ammo for your various weapons that you find throughout the game. Now guys, speaking of different weapons, all the weapons in Steel Ranger behave and look differently, which is actually very impressive. However, due to the limitations of ammo, I personally find myself unwilling to use them as much as I would love to, and I don't really experiment with them all that much because I always feel that I'm going to need them for an upcoming difficult section or an upcoming boss fight. Boss fights in this game are relatively easy, but there's always that notion that I should be saving my ammo for these boss fights. So even though you can find ammo just about anywhere, you can purchase it, it drops from enemies, you can find it throughout the world, in both the main areas as well as secret areas, which you often access with your bombs and wheel form, I still feel that I should be preserving my ammo more than I probably should. I can't stress this enough, guys. Steel Ranger is just such a fascinating game on so many levels you have no idea. Now this is a very well planned, very well thought out, bite-sized Metroidvania developed by a single, multi-talented individual. Everything from the game's incredibly atmospheric music to the game's stunning pixel art, the coding, the full-on level character and enemy design have all been designed by one person, and that is Lasse Öörni. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce the name, it's a Finnish name, it's not easy to pronounce. Mr. Lasse is no stranger to game development on the Commodore 64 and other platforms. So it's no wonder that we got such a masterpiece in Steel Ranger on the Commodore 64. What really stands out about Steel Ranger, in my opinion, is just how similar to what we had with Sam's Journey, is just how much it embraces modern game design and does away with the annoyances and shortcomings of old Euro game design, which plagued so many games on platforms like the Commodore 64, Amiga, PC, and so on. From the game's death system, which is very lenient, to its health recovery system, everything is geared towards helping the player progress the game, while offering a fair bit of challenge, but never ever making the experience overly demanding or frustrating. And that right there is good game design in my opinion. As soon as the player dies, they respawn back at the beginning of the last screen they entered. However, because of the way the save system works in the game, it works the same as the death system, meaning that you can save anywhere in the game, and you will start from the state you were in when you entered the last screen you saved on. You should utilize multiple save slots, which the game allows, in order to avoid unnecessarily bad situations with your health. This probably goes more for higher difficulty levels. On easy and normal difficulty, this should not be a problem. Now, speaking of difficulty levels, the game offers several difficulty levels. I personally honestly love playing the game on easy the most, or even on casual. Normal mode is perfectly fine, it's not difficult, but enemies are a little bit bullet spongy, so they take a little bit more time to kill. But overall, I think that easy and normal mode are absolutely perfect for this game. Just like all other Metroidvanias, Steel Ranger has a nice map screen, which you reveal as you explore the environments. Now, the map doesn't really have any other icons other than your current location. However, surprisingly, it's a very clear and easy to understand map, and it's very useful and helpful. Now, I haven't found a way to activate the map with the controller. You have to use the keyboard to activate the map and the main menu where you can look at your stats, you can save your game, quit your game, and so on. However, that really is not that big a deal. Now, when it comes to switching between weapons in the game, you can do it either by pressing the space bar on the Commodore 64, or you can do sort of a command on the controller itself by pressing the fire button quickly twice and then cycling between the weapons with the D-pad or joystick. You have to understand, guys, that Commodore 64 has very limited controls. All you get is the keyboard, which is very awkward to play on, and a joystick or a controller. And this joystick by default has only one functional button and a D-pad or a joystick that you move around. So the developer of Steel Ranger managed to cram so many different functions in just that one controller. We have morph ball mechanics, we have weapon switching, we have different weapons, jumping, jetpack functions, and it all works so well. The controls in this game truly are outstanding given the Commodore 64's limitations. To make things even more interesting, Steel Ranger also provides the player with different endings depending on whether you manage to save your crewmates, whether you manage to defeat a certain boss throughout the game, and so on. And believe me, you can still get the best outcome for the planet and humanity by losing some of your crew members, and you will get a good ending, but the game will let you know that you messed up and make you feel bad about it at the end. Getting the best possible ending isn't all that hard if you pay attention to the dialogue from your crewmates and if you do your exploration. Now, when it comes to backtracking and traversing, it's a fairly small world. I mean, it's a big world for Commodore 64 standards, but it's not overly big for Metroidvania standards. So while there is some backtracking here and there, it's not bad at all. It shouldn't be an issue. And throughout your backtracking adventures, you will be defeating enemies and collecting their parts, so you're going to be richer and able to purchase more ammo or upgrades or whatever else you need. So honestly, whatever the game does, it does to your benefit most of the time, and all you have to do is just enjoy playing this incredibly atmospheric experience. Alright, I understand that I keep praising Steel Ranger way too much, but in my opinion it deserves it. Steel Ranger is just such a carefully crafted game on all fronts. Its visuals alone showcase a very intricate knowledge of art and pixel art, as well as the inner workings of the Commodore 64 and its limitations. This is not something that just about anybody can do. The developer clearly understands the platform's severely limited capabilities and works with them to create a truly visually stunning masterpiece. As I've said before, the Commodore 64 has a palette of only 16 colors, and combining those colors requires that you follow certain rules and certain limitations and certain regulations, so it's not that you can just combine these colors all willy-nilly however you want. And what Lasse Öörni did here is he basically managed to combine these 16 colors by abiding these limitations in ways so that he gets highlights, he gets shading, he's able to showcase wonderful light sources, environmental lighting, and all sorts of impressive things in the visuals of Steel Ranger. It's just such a visual masterpiece. This game, I can't get enough of it. And don't even get me started on the incredibly atmospheric music that we hear throughout the entire game. Now, unfortunately, unlike Lasse Öörni, I am not a multi-talented individual, so I couldn't tell you just what makes this music so good and so amazing, because I know jack all about music in all honesty, but what I do know is that this is hands down one of the most amazing soundtracks I've heard in Metroidvanias. It fits the game's environments so perfectly and creates a truly outstanding atmosphere. It's just incredible. Overall, Steel Ranger is a highly polished, very serious, although bite-sized Metroidvania that you definitely should play. The game plays perfectly fine on any device that can run Commodore 64 games if you're unable to play it on real hardware. One thing to note is that you can easily purchase the digital version off of itch.io anytime. However, the cartridge version that I have was unfortunately so limited in quantities that Psytronik Software, the publisher, sold it for a bit the summer of 2024, and that was it. I don't know why they did this. I don't know why the cartridge doesn't have a unlimited release like Sam's Journey through Protovision and so on. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. I believe you can still buy the game on cassette tape and floppy disks, which I don't recommend. I don't like those formats. I think that you should purchase the digital version and play it however you can on whatever devices you can. So guys, I really hope you enjoy Steel Ranger 2 when you get to play it. I'm not gonna say if you get to play it, I'm saying when you get to play it. You really have to play this game and love it.